This is 4.1, Lesson 5. This is about the Federalists versus the Anti-Federalists. So, we've been talking about the Constitutional Convention, where there was lots of compromises made. So once the Constitution is finished, then it is basically going to be debated, and then the states need to ratify it. So that's part of what we're going to talk about in today's lesson. So moving on to the next slide. Remember, complete your guided notes as you do this. Success criteria. I will be able to summarize the arguments of the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. Okay, so first of all, let's get some definitions. Who are the Federalists? Who are the Anti-Federalists? So it's important to know that not everyone supported the Constitution. Sometimes today we think that, oh yeah, everyone supported it. It's obvious, it's clear as day that the Constitution is good and everyone supported it. But that is not necessarily true. There were many people who did not support the Constitution after they had written it. So the people that supported the Constitution were called Federalists. They named themselves Federalists. A good way to remember that is, remember, the Constitution gave the national or the federal government more power. Under the Articles of Confederation, remember that's the government before this that they tried, did not give enough power to the federal government. And so this new Constitution, they wanted to give more power to the federal government. So they were called Federalists. They named their opponents, the people who opposed the Constitution, the Anti-Federalists. They even called them sometimes Shays'ites. Think back to Shays' rebellion and Daniel Shays. People that followed him were called Shays'ites. Remember, he rebelled against the government, and it showed some of the weaknesses in the Articles of Confederation, and that the federal government didn't have power to stop such rebellion. So the Federalists sometimes called the Anti-Federalists Shays'ites, but they opposed ratifying the new Constitution. And as you'll see in the next few slides, they had lots of different reasons why they opposed them, and not everyone had the same reasons. Some states opposed the Constitution for one reason, and another state for a different reason. So let's talk about some of those. So first of all, Federalists, remember, they supported ratifying. Ratifying means approving the Constitution. So there were lots of famous Federalists. Of course, we know these people more because, spoiler alert, the Constitution was eventually ratified. And so a lot of these people are famous people that we know as founding fathers. So you got George Washington, you got Benjamin Franklin, you got Alexander Hamilton right here, and you got James Madison right here. James Madison played a huge role at the Constitutional Convention. He is known as the father of the Constitution because he wrote much of it and came up with many of the main ideas in it. They believed that the national government was too weak under the Articles of Confederation. Okay, then the Anti-Federalists, of course, opposed it. They thought that the Articles of Confederation needed to be revised and not completely thrown out. And some famous Anti-Federalists, Patrick Henry, he's the guy that said, if you remember, give me liberty or give me death. James Winthrop, of course, there were others. They're not as famous, probably because the Constitution ends up getting ratified. Okay, so now we're going to look at some of the arguments the Anti-Federalists made. So first of all, they were concerned about taxation. They thought that the Constitution gave too much power to tax to the national government. They thought, remember, under the Articles of Confederation, the federal government, a lot of the problems came from taxing. They didn't have the power to tax, so they couldn't really realistically raise an army and do lots of things that they needed to do. So However, with this new constitution, they thought it gave too much power to the national government to tax, and they didn't want that to turn into a king situation. Military power, they thought that the Constitution allowed the national government to have too much power in using the military. Okay, of course, under the Articles of Confederation, the Federalists would argue that they didn't have enough power. Anti-Federalists were worried about the executive branch, meaning the president. The president, as we'll learn more, is at the head of the executive branch. And they thought that the new Constitution gave too much power to the president, and that essentially the president would just turn into another king. And they were really, really worried about that. So those are some of the main arguments that the Anti-Federalists made. Of course, there were others. Ratification. So in the Constitution, it said that 9 states needed to ratify it, 9 of the 13. Ratify just means to approve. And of course, on June 21st, 1788, the final state ratified the Constitution, and it went into effect March 4th, 1789, and has been in effect ever since. And so, what does it say? Just think about this question. What does it say about the document that was written at the Constitutional Convention? That it still is in play today and is working pretty well. Obviously, not perfect, but is still, doing a pretty good job of governing our country.